Hello and welcome to another edition of Ukraine This Week. With me, Diana Skaya, and I'm filling in for Don Arleth. This past week has seen a dramatic escalation in the Middle East after the United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran that killed Tehran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Iran retaliated with hundreds of missiles and Shahed kamikaze drones targeting military and civilian sites across the Gulf. Now, according to Ukraine's president, more than 800 Patriot missiles were used to intercept the attacks. Volodymyr Zelensky now says that Kyiv could counter Iranian-made Shahed drones with low-cost interceptor drones if allies provide more Patriot systems in return. Meanwhile, Ukraine's hopes of fast-tracking EU membership have suffered a setback after several member states rejected a proposal to let Kyiv join first and complete integration later. The bloc is also struggling to finalize a major aid package for Ukraine amid a dispute with Hungary. We'll discuss all of this with our guests, but first, let's have a look to this next report on Ukraine This Week. Trilateral negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine, scheduled for the 5th of March to the 9th in Abu Dhabi, have been put on hold due to the drastic escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran, which has shaken the Gulf region and shifted political focus away from Ukraine. After 4 years of resisting Russia's attacks carried out with Iranian Shahed drones, Kyiv accumulated expertise in drone defense and has been receiving requests from Middle East partners and reportedly the United States for anti-drone support. Ukraine uses cheap interceptors worth just a few $1,000s to destroy Shaheds, which cost $30,000 each, while Patriot missiles come with $1 million price tag. So Kyiv is now proposing a deal.
Our request is very straightforward. We would like, with the help of countries we can name and those we cannot, to cover our deficit in Patriot missiles. And, in return, we can provide the corresponding number of interceptors.
Despite global turmoil, Russia has not eased its relentless attacks on Ukraine. In Mykolaiv, Russian drones targeted railway infrastructure, including a train traveling from Dnipro. Meanwhile, the situation on the front line remains tense. But this week brought some success for the Ukrainian army. Its forces liberated 9 settlements in the Oleksandrivka sector of the southeastern front. Moreover, in February, Ukraine took back more territory than Russia captured during that period, marking one of Kyiv's most successful advances in the past 2 years. And in more good news for Ukraine, a total of 500 Ukrainian servicemen have been brought home from Russian captivity. The youngest freed prisoner of war is 26 years old. The oldest is 60. But on the European political stage, Kyiv has faced a setback. The European Commission's plan for a so-called reversed accession for Ukraine has been largely dismissed by EU member states. The scheme would have allowed Ukraine to formally join the EU first, while gaining key benefits such as voting rights, agricultural subsidies, and cohesion funds gradually over time. Ukraine's EU accession is also being considered as a possible security guarantee in any future peace deal with Russia. And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is optimistic about Ukraine soon joining the bloc.
Is there a way for Ukraine to become a member of the European Union? The answer is a very clear yes, of course. And Ukraine is on a good way to become a member of the European Union.
But even before EU accession, Kyiv has already gained at least 2 ill-wishers. As tensions with Budapest and Bratislava over the Druzhba pipeline are not easing, but escalating. EU governments and the European Commission have been asking Kyiv to allow an on-site visit to verify efforts to restore oil flows and resolve the dispute. But Ukraine's president says he's not in favor of resuming the operation of the pipeline.
Because this is Russian oil, there are some things, principles that simply have no price. The Russians are killing us, and we're supposed to give poor little Orbán oil, because without it, he won't win elections.
But the dispute around the pipeline is becoming a major obstacle for Kyiv. Hungary has delayed the approval of a crucial €90 billion loan for Ukraine until the pipeline is reopened, and Viktor Orbán continues his threats.
If they mess about with the Hungarians, severely blackmail us, they cannot expect us to make financial decisions in Brussels supporting Ukraine. Until order is restored, we will use every means at our disposal.
Coincidence or not, immediately after Orbán said Budapest would use political and financial tools to pressure Ukraine, Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha reported 7 Ukrainian bank employees detained in Budapest as hostages, according to the minister. Hungarian authorities say the bank employees were arrested on suspicion of money laundering, with cash in transit vehicles also seized. Among those detained was reportedly a former Ukrainian security service general overseeing a shipment of $40 million, 35 million euros, and 9 kilograms of gold. Hungarian-Ukrainian relations are now at their lowest. Under Orbán, tensions continue to soar as Hungary blocks sanctions on Russia, restricts essential aid to Ukraine, and opposes its EU membership, using hostility toward Ukraine as a political tool. Any improvement seems unlikely until Orbán leaves office, which some say could happen only if he loses in April's parliamentary elections. And joining me now from the Southwest Florida is TVP World correspondent and host of Ukraine This Week, Don Arleth. Don, so good to see you being in Florida. Don, so there are reports that Russia has been reportedly giving Iran the locations of U.S. military assets in the Middle East. And if this is true, this can actually be changing this entire conflict geopolitically. Now, what more do we know about this report? What is coming out from the United States?
Yes, Diana. So on Friday morning, this was reported by the Washington Post that 3 anonymous sources that are, have details on the matter claim that Russia is actively propping up the Iranian regime by helping them target U.S. forces and others in the region. We know that so many countries have been attacked. Iran continues to even attack some of those nations that they're friendly with. So what seems on the surface very concerning, we have at least 4 servicemen and women that have been killed since these hostilities began, since the joint attack by Israel and by the United States on Iran have taken place. This information is concerning. Now, from another standpoint, we can say that, well, the United States has helped Ukrainian forces do the exact same thing for the last 4 years. However, we've seen since Donald Trump has become president that situation has somewhat changed, and actually the Europeans are providing a little bit more of that intelligence, and the Ukrainians themselves are providing themselves with their own intelligence to make some of those long-range strikes into Russia. So we have a dynamic situation, but this does mark the first major U.S. adversary who is actively helping the Russians target U.S. forces and others in this war.
Don, let me ask you, you did just touch upon that. Washington has requested that Ukrainian experts help the Gulf states, right, to repel Shahed drone attacks. And Ukraine definitely needs those Patriot missiles to defend against Russian ballistic missiles. Now, Don, my question to you is, will Kyiv's demands finally be met?
Well, that's a great question. I would say it's really difficult at this point in time. Of course, Washington is seeking the assistance of the Ukrainians. Ukrainians have the most experience in combating Shahed drones amongst any of the allies. It's also really telling that Volodymyr Zelensky has offered his support, but obviously needs Patriot missiles. And as you rightly mentioned in the introduction to this show, President Zelensky pointing out that more Patriot missiles have been used in the last week than Ukraine has received from the West in the entirety of the war. Now, when I was back in Kyiv for the anniversary of the full-scale invasion, of course, there was a day where we were hit by ballistic missiles. We also heard what sounded to be like Patriot missiles being used on the last day that we were there. So we know how important this is. And Ukraine has a very difficult time encountering ballistic missiles that Russia continues to fire at it. Now, over here in the United States, there's a really big debate right now about whether the United States weapons stockpiles are sufficient. President Trump, later on Friday, is having a meeting with all the defense companies. He has already suspended stock buybacks because U.S. weapons stocks are so low. Trump administration saying that there is absolutely no problem, and that this war can continue to go on and on for as long as the United States wants, and that there will be no weapon shortage. But seeing these meetings in Washington with President Trump and the weapons manufacturers here in the U.S. is very telling that maybe not all systems are up to par, and especially when we talk about those Patriot missiles.
Thank you so much, Don Arleth, coming to us live from Florida. And now joining me is Maria Zolkina, Associate Research Fellow at the London School of Economics. Hi, Maria. So glad to have you here with us on this edition of Ukraine This Week. Now, let's begin with the conflict that has shaken up the Middle East for a week now, and unfortunately, it's already impacted far beyond the Gulf region, now into Europe. I want you for a moment to listen to what President Zelensky had to say about it.
We're not involved in this war yet, but Iranian drones have struck civilians. There have been signals from our Gulf partners that they are interested in our expertise. If they ask, we're ready to provide it. There are also requests from our European and American partners to share our experience with those countries. I've personally spoken with the leaders of Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and the King of Jordan, and I also speak with other leaders. We're ready to help the civilian populations of these countries. But as for weapons, we're also at war, and I've said quite frankly, we lack something our partners do have, for example, Patriot missiles. But Patriot missiles can't shoot down Iranian drones. So those countries need the interceptor drones that we possess. If there's a will to proceed with this exchange of technology and weapons, Ukraine is available.
All right, Maria. Well, we just heard President Zelensky say that Ukraine is ready to share its drone interceptor expertise with the Gulf states if the allies provide patriotic missiles. My question to you is this a realistic exchange? What do you think?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be with you again. Honestly, I would say that this is a good moment to start negotiations about using Ukrainian developed technologies for all over the world and whom we trust. That's a lot, and I think that's the main question, for technologies to be used by the partner we are sharing it with, not to have the situation when the technologies are transmitted somewhere else. However, I wouldn't be that much optimistic about sharing lots of techniques and technologies right now in the coming weeks. So to me, the important for Ukraine right now is to, and the easiest way, honestly, to get the sufficient number of Patriot missiles and Patriot systems as such from US in order to help US to intercept the drones, in particular Shahed drones, in the region of the Gulf. However, signing new contracts with the Gulf states will be the next step, because it's not that easy, and in couple of weeks the new contracts will not be put on the table when it comes to Gulf states and Ukraine about the interceptor drones.
Maria, we are talking here about the Patriot missiles. I mean, Zelensky did point out that more than 800 of those Patriot missiles were used to intercept Iranian attacks, more than Ukraine has received during the entire full-scale war launched by Russia. What does that comparison tell us about Western priorities?
It's not a surprise for Ukrainian side that the very minimum Ukraine was given when it comes to Patriot missiles and to Patriot systems as such is something which was totally illogical and which was absolutely not justified by the position of US and some of the European allies who just keep these Patriot systems back at their home, waiting for some moment for them to be used probably. But the situation is that during four years of large-scale invasion, larger amount of missiles could have been already produced, which wasn't the case yet. And the majority of these missiles were just preserved in the stockpiles and now just gone within less than a week when it comes to the situation in the Middle East. And the situation will get even worse because the intensity of the warfare can be like it was during the first week of the war in the Middle East for the next weeks to come? And if so, it means that the stockpiles will be getting out of the Patriot missiles very soon, and Ukraine will be left in a couple of months from now, will be left even without that minimum which we have had during previous 4 years. And I think that's why the short-term strategy of Ukraine is and should be just to get as many Patriot missiles right now until 2026, just to fulfill the needs of Ukraine as possible, and exchange for this just to share some interceptor drones and other technologies Ukraine is using to shoot down the much cheaper drones sent from Iran.
Maria, let me challenge you here a little bit with everything that you're saying, though, but in a scenario that if Gulf countries and the Pentagon were actually looking at Ukrainian interceptor drones, could Ukraine actually become an exporter of this battlefield innovation while still fighting its own war with Russia?
Absolutely. Ukrainian capacities and capabilities on the ground, even without the joint enterprises with the European partners, the enterprises which we have started and plan to produce drones jointly for years to come. So local capacities can be doubled, can be tripled very easily and in a very smart and smooth way, just in a weeks. The only problem which has been taking place for months and for years, that the European partners at Ukraine or US or now Gulf, who have money for this production to be doubled or tripled, multiplicated, generally saying scaled. So they were not ready to invest because they need the whole bureaucratic procedures, which sometimes needs years or at least months to go through in order to organize tenders, in order to organize and check everything on the ground, in order to check all the corruption risks which they are considered about. But right now, if you have money, if you are ready to go smoothly, you can really get thousands of drones just ordered and purchased from Ukrainian local enterprises in a month, in a weeks even.
Mm-hmm. Maria, let me ask you your personal opinion on this. Do you think that there's a risk that if this war in the Middle East escalates even further with Iran, is it going to actually distract Western governments from supporting Ukraine? What do you think?
It distracts the international attention, honestly, but I wouldn't say that Europe has the choice just to get to turn this back on Ukraine, because right now the interest of Europe and Ukraine to make Ukraine sustainable when it comes to repelling Russia's attack is as united and consolidated. I mean, the interest as never before, not in 2022 or 2023. For this reason, I do expect that we might have problems with some types of weapons, in particular Storm Shadows, missiles, the longer range ones, and the analog scalps when it comes to French. So British produced and UK French produced longer range missiles. We might have problems with, for instance, this kind of supplies if both our partners are afraid of Iran striking on Cyprus, for instance. However, generally speaking, Europe is, I wouldn't believe that Europe right now will be in particular totally diversing from supporting Ukraine, because that's not the strategy of European states. And US is not a surprise with their interest to be redirected somewhere else. It's something we have witnessed, we have been witnessing for a year already.
Except maybe one country in Europe, Maria. I want to talk to you about the latest spat between Hungary and Ukraine. Now, the latest is that, of course, Péter Szijjártó has said that he's demanding answers from Kyiv regarding large cash shipments that passed through Hungary. We're talking about, since January, reportedly $900 million. and 420 million euros in cash, as well as 146 kilograms of gold, have been transported across Hungary. Hungary has made reportedly 7 arrests, and Sziarto saying, hey, if this is truly a transaction between banks, why was it not carried out by transfer? Maria, fill us in. What happened here? What's going to happen with this money? What do we know so far? What are Ukrainians? What is the Ukrainian government saying about this?
Ukrainian government will be fighting for getting the people and money back, because nothing was illegal here. And the most important thing, that this is the very regular procedures between transferring the money between banks. In this situation, Austrian one and Ukrainian ones, which was done for years and for many times already, according to the whole procedure. So you can't just carry that amount of cash just because you want this, and you can't hide it. So, but the thing is, and that's the reaction back in Ukraine, that right now there is a highly speculation, just information and political war between political elites, which is totally destructive, and it comes to personal antipathy between, on the one hand, some of the Ukrainian leadership, someone among the Ukrainian leadership, including absolutely unsuccessful and actually destructive statements from President Zelensky, who criticized personally Orbán, and I wouldn't believe this was considered as something helping Ukraine to at least survive when Orbán is totally not in favor of having constructive relations with Ukraine. But that kind of statements don't help, actually. And now we have seen just a reaction from the Hungarian side, the same emotional, the same not legal, just kind of informational campaign around very regular case, which no one would expect would be treated like Hungarian politicians, and Sziarto in particular, presented this now.
Maria, if you're saying that, hey, look, I'm just being a devil's advocate here, okay? If you're saying that this is a procedure that's actually been done, it isn't the first time that we've been seeing it happen. Why do you think that this is something that is coming out now?
Exactly, because President Zelensky made several statements hurting personally Orbán, and those statements were too harsh, even for those who don't see any perspective for the constructive relations between Hungary and Ukraine in Ukraine. And President Zelensky was criticized even in Ukraine for these statements. They were beyond the line, let's say, and they didn't help Ukraine anyhow, honestly. So it was kind of, speaking from a political science perspective, it was kind of overestimation of Ukrainian ability to raise some pro-Ukrainian sentiments. It's got absolutely reversed and opposite effect. And even Peter Magyar, the main opponent of Prime Minister Orbán, supported Orbán, basically, because that was really too harsh from Ukrainian president, attacking personally Orbán recently. And that's why that is just basically a retaliation, the political one. So no one in Ukraine considers this case to be something else but this.
And Maria, at the same time, of course, Zelensky, we do know, has openly criticized Viktor Orbán over blocking the new EU aid package, right, for Ukraine. Let me ask you this: do you think the dispute could actually seriously delay both the EU financial help to Ukraine and, at the same time, accession talks for Ukraine's long-term path to membership, to EU membership?
It can. And I do think that it has been impacting for a couple of years already, the situation in Ukraine, in Ukrainian European integration. However, I still see the processes which are going in the European Commission and in the Council of the European Union, where the legal ways within the treaties of the founding treaties of the European Union are being searched to avoid this veto, in particular the veto of Hungary just to permanently block the opening of the negotiation clusters with Ukraine. And hopefully we will finally see the way and procedure to be used when the veto will not be maturing. However, let's be honest, many in Brussels and in other European capitals silently, but thinking about positive changes if in the upcoming parliamentary elections in Hungary, the opposition wins because they have chances. And no one was pushing from Brussels these changes to start another procedure because it would be an unprecedented case just to try to avoid the veto Hungary and just to destroy the system with this veto capacity of member states, because everyone is waiting what's going to happen on the 12th of April when there will be parliamentary elections. Probably these steps from Brussels won't be needed if the authorities are changed after the parliamentary elections in Hungary.
And we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much, Maria Zolkina, Associate Research Fellow at the London School of Economics, for being our guest here today on Ukraine This Week. And that's all for this edition of Ukraine This Week here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. See you next week.